Greetings sailors, and welcome to my look at the USS Arizona, which is the latest premium ship to hit World of Warships. It's a US Tier 6 battleship, and it actually represents a class of ships that we don't have in the game already, unlike the last American battleship we had, the Texas, which was basically a premium New York, which was a bit different. It's got really good anti-aircraft compared to the regular New York. Well, this, although it's not quite the same as the New Mexico, which is also at Tier 6, it largely plays in the same way. Now, the Arizona itself, as one of two Pennsylvania-class battleships, it was actually the preceding class to the New Mexico's, and it was one of the ships that was lost at Pearl Harbor in 1941, and it was actually the one that was lost with greatest loss of life as well, because one of the armor-piercing bombs dropped by the Japanese basically detonated a magazine, and the entire thing went sky high in a very short space of time, with the loss of over 1,100 men. So it was something like over half the lives lost in the Japanese attack at Pearl Harbor was just from the Arizona. So it's a rather sad history for this particular ship. And it was actually badly damaged enough that they basically decided it was not worth trying to refloat it and repair it. So it remains there as a war grave in Pearl Harbor today, with a memorial that you can actually go and visit. So that's enough of the sad history of the real life Arizona. What we have in game is more or less something that plays like a New Mexico, but there's one important difference. Well, two. One is that it has a better range than the New Mexico, but the second is that it's got a lower rate of fire. So although you've got the same number of guns and the same caliber of guns, you're just shooting less often. However, I think the fact that you do have a better range kind of makes up for it. You've also got less anti-aircraft capability. It's not as good as the New Mexico, so you have to be slightly more wary of planes dealing with a New Mexico. But otherwise, it's not a bad ship. It's a very solid Tier 6 American battleship. Now, as to the actual stats, well, we'll start off with hit points. It has 57,200, which puts it a little over the Fuso, actually, which has got 57,100. So this is, by a slender margin, the healthiest battleship at Tier 6, at least for now, because we know there are German battleships coming up in the next 2 months or so. But it means it can take an extra hit or two. As for its torpedo protection even, and its armour generally, it seems pretty good. It's a standard pattern battleship alongside the, well, I've already said it's the preceding class to the New Mexico, so it was a very similar design philosophy. It's got pretty reasonable protection. I found in practice that it was fairly tough. I don't know if you would say it was as tough as the New Mexico. It's a little hard to judge without having seen an exact armour model, but my feeling was that it can take a battering. Now, in terms of firepower, it is fairly identical to the New Mexico in that it's got 4 triple turrets with 14-inch guns. They do exactly the same amount of damage. They've got the exact same amount of fire chance. I think the shell velocities, the initial shell velocities, are a bit different. It's got slower shells than the New Mexico. But the biggest difference overall is that it's 1.7 rounds per minute versus 1.8, so you've got a couple of extra seconds reload, and the base range is 16 kilometers. Now you compare that to New Mexico, which has 14.9, and that's a fairly significant difference. With the artillery plotting room, you can get that to 18.6, which, you know, it's not as good as a Fuso or a Congo or whatever, but it's still pretty comfortable. At this point, by the way, yes, that's you might notice that that's a Clemson. That's a destroyer that's getting quite close. I was maybe a little incautious in getting close to the island, but that Clemson was also being awfully aggressive. And yes, there's a Mutsuki popping out the other side as well, so I'm going to take one of those torpedoes, but hopefully I can avoid all the Mutsuki's ones as well. So that's the firepower. It's pretty much the same. The dispersion, I mean, it's probably about the same as New Mexico. It's a little hard to judge, but it seems about the same level of accuracy, and with the extra range, I think that's the most comfortable thing about this ship, is those extra couple of kilometers range. It really does make a significant difference. In terms of its secondaries, it is very similar to the New Mexico. It's got a bunch of those 4-inch guns, essentially the destroyer guns, and they have a slightly shorter range, 4 kilometers versus 4.2, but overall it's got a reasonably good spread of secondaries, so if anybody gets within that 4 kilometers, they are going to take a little bit of damage, but you know, not a huge amount. AA rating is a big difference between this. Now, overall, the New Mexico does have the best AA at Tier 6 in terms of battleships. This isn't hugely awful. I mean, it's not like it's got no AA. It's a similar-ish level to the Fuso, maybe a little bit worse than the Fuso. So it does have, I think, in theory, the worst AA of the Tier 6 battleships, but it's really not far behind the Fuso. You will shoot down some planes, but your AA will probably struggle with higher tier planes. And you can, of course, take skills and equipment to increase the size of your envelope, but overall, yes, it's not going to protect you that well. It's not like the Texas, where it's just going to absolutely shred anything that gets close by. Speed-wise, exactly the same as the New Mexico, 21 knots with a turn radius of 640. So it doesn't turn quite as well as the Warspite, which is known for having an exceptionally tight turning radius at Tier 6. That's got a 550 meter turn radius, which is why the Warspite is so good at dodging torpedoes. But this isn't bad either. 640 is pretty decent. And then you've got the Fuso coming fairly dead last with 740. So there's a quite big difference between the Fuso and the Warspite. But this is, you know, in the middle. It's good enough. It's not a huge turn radius. It does have however, a slightly worse rudder shift time than the New Mexico, so it's a little less responsive. You can put on equipment that will increase your rudder responsiveness, which might actually be worth considering. I mean, battleships generally, you throw them in a hard turn and they're going to take a little while to respond regardless, but the difference between like a 14.5 second rudder shift and 12 seconds, sometimes combined with the turn radius, that might actually be enough to save you from taking a torpedo or whatever. But it's not a bad mover though. I mean, it's slow. It's a US standard pattern battleship, so it's never going to win any races, but it moves good enough. And if you're used to something like the New Mexico or the New York or whatever, then you will be able to, you know, make use of this. It really is exactly the same in that regard. Lastly, we come down to detectability, and it's a little bit worse in terms of its base detectability than the New Mexico. It's 14.4 versus 14.2, but being a premium ship, of course, it gets free camo, essentially, which takes it down to 14 kilometers. And if you had all of the skills, if you had that 5th point captain skill to go along with the camo, you could get it down to about 12 kilometers, I believe, if I've done my sums correctly. But of course, you can get the New Mexico to be slightly better than that, 11.8. But yeah, still, it's I mean, if you hold fire, 12 kilometers would be well within your range in terms of your guns. So you could, in theory, I mean, if you had a 5th point captain skill and you had, I don't see why you wouldn't have the camo on this thing, you could actually sneak up relatively close to people. So that's it for the stats. I mean, it's largely, as I've said, like a New Mexico, except it fires a little less often, but it can fire a bit further. And personally, I quite like that. I mean, the New Mexico's got a decent range anyway. Well, it does if you use the plotting room, and to have an extra 1.3 kilometers to play with on top of that, it gives you a few more options, especially when you're dealing with the Fuso, which of course has over 21 kilometers range. So, as you can see from this game, I've already done a bit of damage. I did some dancing with the destroyers earlier on. This was by far the most interesting game I had in this. I mean, it was a fairly top tier game. Even bottom tier, just having that extra range to play with actually does make a pretty big difference. But on a lot of the maps, you're not even necessarily going to use all of that range. Some of the smaller ones, like if you get straight, for instance, you'll be able to comfortably cover quite a lot of that. But in this case, I mean, I'm well within range of this Cleveland, who is now... I mean, we played a fairly defensive game in this one. And we've managed to take out most of the enemy team at this point. But we've lost enough ships ourselves that it's not like we're at 900 points already. So there's still plenty more opportunity to do more damage. But it's not actually going to be that much more damage, I have to say. I've done already the majority of the damage I'm going to do in this game. So if I can take the Cleveland out, that'd be nice. I mean, he's going down anyway. He's wandered into a bad neighbourhood here. We've got this defensive line, and you can see there's a lot of ships here that have taken quite a battering. And I've actually taken a bit of a battering myself, but this guy's just completely outnumbered. There we go. So we've got a Fuso up to the north there, and a Kirov who's all the way back at their cap, but he's still nearly within range. And they've also got a Farragut who's also... I actually don't know what health the Farragut's on, but he's way back on the 10 line. And trying to chase down destroyers in US battleships is usually not the most fun thing that you can do. So I think the pace of this battle might slow down a bit at this point. However, I am going to do a bit more damage. And as this Fuso is still really quite healthy, it's probable... Hopefully I'm not going to give too much away, but probable that I'm going to get the majority of the remainder of my damage out of this guy. And he actually seems to be now pressing forward. So I decide I'm going to get a lot closer and I'm going to engage this guy. Now there's islands between us at the moment, but that gives me an opportunity to get my rear turrets around, because if he keeps coming south, he's going to be passing to my starboard side. And at the moment my rear guns are pointed towards the port side. There's also that Farragut over there. I mean, I'm just keeping tabs on him, but there's multiple ships going for him. We've got Kirov and something else. Can't actually quite see on the preview. A little ship. What is that? Furataka, there we go. I temporarily put the preview on the big monitor, just to have a quick look at what that was. But yeah, in theory, they can handle that guy, right? Well, we've lost the Kirov already. He was actually quite low health. I think between the Fuso and the Farragut, who was not shy about using his guns in this one. In fact, the Farragut did pretty well, the enemy Farragut. He's got 3 kills. They were able to take him down. Now, I know that this... oh, that's tempting, the enemy Kirov. I know that this Fuso is going to come out from behind the cover of the island relatively soon. But if I could get a sneaky shot into the Kirov, that'd be nice as well. Of course, this is putting my guns around the wrong way again. Yeah, there's the Farragut. He's actually now getting quite close to me, but I can survive some HE shells from Farragut. That's not going to be an issue. The Fuso, however, well, I'm trying to angle quite carefully here. I don't want to run myself aground, but I also don't want to expose a broadside to the Fuso. And with my little bit of faffing trying to shoot at the Kirov, my rear turrets aren't really quite there yet. However, this is going to be some beautiful broadside shots. Look at this. Less than 5 kilometers, so it's quite hard to miss even with a battleship. So there we go. That was like 11k and a Confederate medal. Get the rear turrets in. Even more damage. So that was nearly 20k damage from those 2 broadsides, and that's a fairly big chunk of his health. Also getting shot by my own Cleveland there, which doesn't help matters especially. But because of the way I approached that island, I'm now able to turn inwards and just keep my front guns locked on this Fuso. I probably won't get the rear guns on him again. The angling might be a little bit awkward, but well, maybe. Let's see if I can bring it round sufficiently. And there we go. Finish him off with a Citadel. So that was enough to put me over 100,000 damage. That was a nice, quite a big chunk of damage there. Now we have lost some ships still ourselves. That sneaky little destroyer, he's up to 4 kills now. So although we are firmly winning, I mean, we just need to stay alive at this point because we're in the last 5.5 minutes of this match. It's not like we're immediately going to win on points. However, the allied Fuso and well, he's almost at the cap circle. He's pretty much on the cap circle, but the Congo looks like he's going that way as well, which just leaves me and that currently stealth firing destroyer, that Farragut. There must be, I don't know if he's got the 5th point captain skill, but there must be a fairly narrow range where he can fire from stealth, because there wasn't any smoke on the water. So maybe he has got quite a skilled captain in that thing. Anyway, I'm burning which is not fantastic, but it's only one fire. The real danger would be if he got close enough to try and torpedo me, and well, he's kind of backed in against that back line of the map, but trying to chase him down would be a tricky proposition even so. And we can actually, there we go, he's been spotted. He's actually now pushing south, I think, just trying to hide. So the Cleveland's going for him, and I'm just continuing to pound this Kirov, who I think was actually firing at the Cleveland rather than me. So if I can get this guy, it'll be a last bit of damage and it'll be a last kill. It's probably unlikely we'll kill that Farragut before we cap, because the Congo's nearly there now. The Fuso is steadily capping, and well, it's hard to complain about it, because it would just be unnecessarily dragging out the game if we all tried to chase down a Farragut, a ship that can definitely run away from us. So again, finish him off with a Citadel. That's the rules of World of Warships. If they're low health and it would not take a lot to kill them, of course you must finish them with a Citadel. It's just, I don't know, it's just how it works. So that's put me at 107,000 damage overall, 3 kills, not bad, and overall, well, I mean, I could have had exactly the same game in a New Mexico, and that is really the main thing I have to say about this ship. Is if you like the New Mexico, it's not exactly a premium New Mexico, but it's effectively, you know, it kind of might as well be in terms of how it plays. So that was a pretty profitable game, over 100,000 damage done, 52 hits landed. I got a Confederate medal and nearly 1,700 base XP, and you can see the enemy Farragut had just over 900 base XP with his 4 kills. So yeah, like I said, that guy actually did pretty well. So we'll see in a moment the actual damage breakdown. It was pretty much all with my main guns with AP shells. I got a couple of hits with the secondaries, but nothing really to speak of. And yeah, overall it was just a nice, profitable game. And I think for the price this ship was on NA, and I should say it's been on sale on NA over the 4th of July weekend, not on sale on EU yet. I don't know when that's going to happen, but for the price of a tier 6 battleship, it's not bad. It's quite fun to play, and of course being mid-tiered with a reasonable range to its guns, that's kind of where the fun level is in World of Warships. It's sort of tiers 4 to 6, maybe some of the tier 7s, and once you get into the higher tiers, just the nature of the game changes a bit. Although Wargaming have been working on making it more fun at the high tiers, I think. So that's my look at the USS Arizona. Not a bad ship at all, and it's definitely got maybe a little more flavour to it than the Texas had, which was just, you know, a New York with lots of DACA. This is, well, it's kind of a New Mexico, but not really, but kind of, but not really. If that makes any sense. Probably not. So hopefully you've found this enjoyable and useful, and if you have, you can hit the like button, you can leave any comments below, you can sub to my channel if you aren't already, and as always, stay tuned for more.